The rain fell on Baltimore's inner harbor like a sheet of hammered glass, shattering the neon reflections of the riverboat casino across the choppy water. Red and electric blue bled into the black ink of the harbor, a perfect cover for the ghost working beneath the pier. Mara Lowell pressed her back against a rust-caked pylon, the cold of the anaught 7 a.m. air biting through her thin rain jacket. She was a gray hat, a digital phantom who walked the line between curiosity and crime, and tonight, she was hunting. Her target was not the casino itself, but the river of data that flowed from its VIP suites. With gloved fingers, she clipped the final lead of her custom-built sniffing device onto a junction box. The small device, waterproofed with resin and electrical tape, blended perfectly into the corroded mess of harbor infrastructure. This was not about money. It was about a ghost of her own, her brother. Leo had vanished 8 months ago from Detroit, leaving nothing but a cold apartment and one digital breadcrumb, a crypto wallet that had suddenly become active again, laundering small, precise amounts through offshore gambling sites. This casino was one of its nodes. Her trail had finally led her here, to the digital doorstep of the Vale Syndicate. Ronan Vale. The name hung over Baltimore's underworld like the low, heavy clouds above. He was new money and old-world discipline, a young boss who had consolidated the fractured port rackets with a bloodless efficiency that terrified his rivals more than any overt violence. He was known for his control, his absolute lack of sentiment. Ronan Vale, the papers said, was a man whose heart beat in time with a stock ticker. Mara's pocketed laptop vibrated. The sniffer was in. She scrambled up the slick ladder to the relative dryness of the service wharf, ducking behind a stack of empty kegs. She pulled the laptop from her waterproof bag, the screen's glow illuminating the focused intensity of her face. The data stream was filthy, a torrent of slot machine payouts and high-roller credit checks. She filtered, sliced, and diverted, her fingers a blur on the keys, hunting the signature of that specific wallet. And then she saw it. Not the wallet, but the hand directing it. A secured packet, bouncing from a server she recognized as Vale's private network, was being prepped for a dead drop of physical handoff. She rerouted the packet through her sniffer, cracking its light encryption in seconds. The file was small, a simple CSV. The name hit her like a punch to the gut, Ledger Blackbird, CSV. It was not a financial record, it was a list of names. 4 of them. 3 were crossed out with digital timestamps, all within the last month. Internal cleansing. This was Ronan Vale's infamous discipline in action. Mara's breath hitched. She was about to close the file, to scrub her presence and run, when her eyes caught the 5th name, the last one on the list, the one not yet crossed out. Elodie Vale. A quick, frantic search. Elodie Vale, philanthropist, recluse, patron of the arts, and, according to a Fawning Society article from 3 years ago, the mother of Ronan Vale. A deafening klaxon split the night, blue and red lights, not from the casino, but from the shore, strobed across the container yard. The whine of sirens grew, converging on her position. BIST, Mara hissed. Recognizing the acronym from chatter on the dark web, the Bureau for Illicit Systems and Trade, this was not a local police response. Someone had tipped them off, or, she realized, she had tripped a silent wire deeper than she knew. She slammed the laptop shut, shoving it into her bag as she vaulted the kegs. She ran, not toward the street, but deeper into the maze of the shipping containers. She moved with a fluid, practiced urgency, her mind already calculating routes, camera locations, and sensor fields. A spotlight swept the alley between the containers. Mara pressed herself flat against the corrugated steel. Pulling a small, homemade device from her belt, she thumbed it on. The spotlight's camera feed would be nothing but static. She rounded the corner, spotting the main exit gate 50 yards away, locked down, its magnetic sensor glowing a dull red. She unholstered a modified paintball pistol. She did not carry a real gun. She took aim, compensated for the wind, and fired. The paintball, filled with a conductive gel paint splattered across the sensor. The light flickered from red to green. The maglock clicked open. Headlights flooded the newly opened gate from the other side. A procession of 3 black sedans, immaculate and imposing, rolled onto the wharf. They stopped. The rear door of the center car opened, and Ronan Vale stepped out. He was exactly as the whispers described, tall, dressed in a black wool overcoat that fit his shoulders with bespoke precision. His dark hair slicked back from a face that was all sharp angles and cold control. He was flanked by 2 men, but he moved like he was alone, his presence sucking the air out of the space around him. He was here for the ledger, the physical copy. Mara was trapped between the feds and the Mafia. The BIST agents were closer now, shouting, fanning out. "BIST, show yourselves!" Ronan's head snapped toward the sound. His men drew their weapons. He held up a gloved hand, silencing them. He had not seen her. Mara made her choice in a fraction of a second. She burst from the shadows behind the container stack, not at the agents, but at him. She moved low and fast, a blur of dark fabric. Ronan's bodyguard, a man built like a vending machine, turned to intercept, but she was too quick. She did not slow, did not stop. She passed Ronan in a whisper, her shoulder brushing his expensive coat, her lips inches from his ear. "Your mother's name is on the list." She was past him before the words fully registered. Ronan Vale froze. It was not a long pause, barely a skipped heartbeat, but for a man like him, it was a seismic event. One of his guards, a younger man, held a hard case file, the ledger. Ronan's hand, covered in supple black leather, shot out. He did not ask for the file. He did not command it. He snatched it from the guard's grasp, a raw, reflexive motion. His men stared. They had never seen the boss snatch. Ronan's gloved hands fumbled with the clasp. For one agonizing moment, the famously steady hands of Ronan Vale trembled. "Gun!" a BIST agent yelled, spotting the bodyguard's weapon. The night exploded. A warning shot cracked, the sound ricocheting off the steel walls of the containers. Ronan was still staring at the file, his face pale in the strobing lights, the truth of her words hitting him. He was exposed. Before he could react, Mara was on him again. She grabbed the front of his overcoat, yanking him with a strength that belied her size. "Down!" she yelled. She pulled him out of the line of fire, crashing them both into the narrow, dark hovel between 2 massive steel containers. He landed hard on top of her, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. For 2 seconds, they were a tangle of limbs, the smell of his expensive cologne and the harbor's low-tide stench filling her nose. He was heavy, solid, and radiating a dangerous, contained energy. He raised himself on one arm, his face inches from hers, confusion warring with a fury she had no doubt was lethal. "Move, and you're dead," she said, her voice even. Before he could answer, she activated the small device on her belt, plunging it into the steel wall of the container. A thick, white smoke erupted from it, instantly obscuring them and the entire alleyway in a choking fog. The BIST agents shouted in confusion. "What the hell did you do?" Ronan's voice was a low growl. "I saved your life. Now shut up." The sirens began to recede, the agents regrouping, their focus diverted by the smokescreen. Ronan pushed himself off her. Standing in the gray, swirling mist, he looked at her, his eyes, dark and unreadable, finally seeing her. This was not a rival. This was not an employee. This was an anomaly. He looked down at the ledger in his hand, then back at her. She knew about his mother. She knew about the list, and instead of using it against him, she had, for reasons he could not begin to fathom, just saved his mother's life. An alliance, unplanned and unwanted, formed in the Steel Canyon. He was the king of this harbor, and she was the one person who knew the walls were about to come crashing down. Astor House was Mara's sanctuary, a quiet coffee and art print shop in a gentrifying neighborhood that smelled of fresh ground espresso, industrial ink, and, If you knew where to stand near the back wall, the faint metallic ozone of her server rack. She sat in the basement workshop, shielded from the world by 2 feet of brick and a Faraday cage door. The Ledger Blackbird CSV file was open on her main monitor. The SHA-256 hash that encrypted the routing data was wrapped in something else, something old. She recognized the methodology, an arrogant, proprietary algorithm the Veil Syndicate had used in its early days. Before Ronan's father had died, it was a digital signature, proving the list was not a plant from an outsider. This came from within Veil's own machine. The bell on the shop door chimed upstairs. Mara's hand froze on her mouse. It was nearly 3 a.m. The shop was dark. She killed her monitors and listened. Heavy, deliberate footsteps crossed the wooden floor above. They stopped at the top of the basement stairs. A polite knock. "Miss O'Lowell, we know you are down there. The door is locked with a magnetic plate. I can either have Kellen break the door, or you can open it." Ronan Vale's voice. It was exactly as she imagined, calm, deep, and devoid of any emotion. She took a breath, closing her eyes. She had 2 options: wipe her drives and pray, or face the music. She hit the switch for the mag lock. The heavy thunk of its release echoed in the small room. The footsteps descended. Ronan Vale appeared, filling the doorway. He still wore the black wool overcoat, now damp from the rain, but he seemed to bring a dry chill into the room. He was followed by one man, older, with a face like worn leather and eyes that missed nothing. This was Kellen Dorsey, the legend who had served Ronan's father. Ronan surveyed the room, the servers, the custom-built rigs, the diagnostic tools. His eyes landed on Mara. He stepped forward. From inside his coat, he produced a heavy, blued steel pistol. He did not point it at her. He placed it on her workbench, the metal sliding softly on the anti-static mat. It rested between a soldering iron and a half-eaten energy bar. "I have 2 questions," Ronan said, his voice quiet. "Who are you? And how do you know about my mother?" He tapped the gun. "Your answer determines whether this is a job offer or a eulogy. Cooperate or disappear." Mara swiveled in her chair to face him, forcing her heart to slow. She pointed to her monitor, bringing the screens back to life. "I'm the person who just saved your mother's life. You should be thanking me." She pulled up the ledger. Elodie Vale, the final entry. Ronan's jaw tightened. The only sign of his anger. Kellen stepped forward, his eyes narrowing at the screen. "I found more," Mara said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She opened a visualization of the crypto trace. The payments for the hit, they're being laundered through a shell wallet. Call sign Tide Glass. She highlighted the exit node. The money is not coming from a rival. It's coming from this. A logo appeared on the screen, a stylized eagle over a bar graph. The National Covert Commerce Authority, the NCCA, a quasi-governmental agency that supposedly monitored trade security. Ronan stared at the screen, his expression hardening. This was not a simple family betrayal. This was a coup, backed by a federal entity. "Aunt Priscilla," he said, the name tasting like ash. "She sits on the Port Commission. She's the only one with NCCA contacts." "Or Jace Varon," Kellen offered, his voice a low rasp. "Your weapons manager. He controls the inventory." "Or Father Cassian," Ronan countered, almost to himself. "He hears their confessions. He knows where everybody is buried, literal or metaphorical." He looked at Mara, his gaze sharp enough to cut. "You found this. Can you prove who posted the order?" "Not yet. The algorithm is old Vale, but the packet was routed through a modern relay. I need access to your internal network." Ronan's mistrust was a physical barrier. He needed to test her. "The Orpheum, my club on Pratt Street. The members' lounge has a signal vault. It holds the week's transaction logs. It is air-gapped, voice-activated, and timed." "And you want me to crack it?" Mara finished. "I want you to prove you are who you say you are," Ronan corrected. "You have until the bar closes. 2 hours." The Orpheum was dark velvet, old whiskey, and silent surveillance. Ronan led her to the back office. Kellen standing guard at the door. The vault was a steel box set into the wall. "It's not on the network. Mara murmured, scanning the device. "It's not connected to anything. How—" Her eyes scanned the room, the bar, the lights, the high-end Italian espresso machine hardwired into the wall. That's it. She went to the bar, ignoring Ronan's questioning look. She ordered Kellen to plug in her portable diagnostic rig. "A side-channel attack," she explained, her voice low. "The vault is shielded, but the power line isn't. I'm going to use the fluctuating power draw from the espresso machine's heating element to send a signal." She worked, typing furiously, creating a code that would translate into microscopic power pulses. As she ran the final script, the strain on the old wiring was too much. The lights in the office flickered, buzzed, and died. The room plunged into total darkness. The only light, the red emergency sign above the door. Startled by the sudden blackness, Mara lost her balance. Stumbling backward, she collided with something solid, warm and unyielding. It was Ronan. He'd been standing directly behind her. His hands shot out, grabbing her upper arms to steady her. He did not let go. She was flush against his chest, her hands trapped between them. She could feel the solid muscle beneath his suit, the surprising, dry heat radiating from him. His clean scent soap and ironed cotton filled her senses. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and for a silent, electric second, she was sure he could feel it. She felt the slow, steady beat of his own heart under her cheek. It was calm, terribly calm. The generators kicked in with a distant roar. The main lights flooded the room, harsh and white. Mara sprang back, the contact broken. The air between them crackled. Ronan dropped his hands, his face an unreadable mask, but his eyes held hers for a half-second too long. A soft click came from the wall. The vault was open. Back at Astor House, the dynamic had shifted. They were no longer a boss and a target. They were two specialists in a room. "We need a new plan," Ronan said, pacing the small workshop. "We cannot trust my network. We have to flush out Blackbird." "We use a decoy," Mara said. "We leak a ghost shipment, something valuable enough for the NCCA to want, and public enough for Blackbird to act." Ronan stopped pacing. "Sable Pier, tomorrow afternoon." "That's a public park," Mara protested. "My mother is there every Tuesday," Ronan said, his voice flat. "She hands out blankets and food for the homeless ministry. Blackbird will already be watching. If they think I am moving assets and visiting my mother, they will see a 2-for-1 opportunity they cannot resist." Mara stared at him, horrified. "You're using your mother as bait." "I am using her location as the stage. You and Kellen will be the only ones who know the truth. The rest of my men will be chasing the ghost." Mara stood up, facing him. The distance between them felt smaller now. "I need to set the terms. Vale, I'm not your soldier. I don't kill people. I am doing this because your Tideglass wallet is the last link I have to my brother's disappearance." Ronan met her gaze. The coldness in his eyes was still there, but it was joined by a flicker of something else. Understanding. "I do not kill innocents. Miss Lowell, my mother is the only thing in my life that is clean. I intend to keep her that way. I want her to live. We want different things, but the path is the same." He held out his hand. "A deal." Mara looked at his hand, strong and steady. She placed hers in it. His grip was firm, calloused and warm. He did not let go. With his free hand, he reached under his shirt, pulling a thin silver chain from his neck. On it was a small, worn, wooden amulet, carved with an intricate knot. "My mother gave this to me when I took over," he said, his voice dropping so low she had to lean in to hear it. "She said it was to protect my soul." He unclasped the chain and pressed the amulet into Mara's palm. The wood was smooth and warm from his skin. "Kellen will be with my mother. You will be my eyes. This is collateral, until she is safe." Mara closed her hand around the small charm. She looked up at Ronan Vale. The ice in his eyes had not melted, but she could see the fire burning behind it. Her gaze, usually so sharp and cynical, softened. "Okay, Ronan," she said. "We hunt." Sable Pier was a strip of concrete and wind-bitten grass jutting into the gray waters of the harbor. By morning, Mara had turned it into a digital minefield. She worked from the back of a panel van parked 2 blocks away, its interior a nest of wires and humming hard drives. She launched 3 small quadcopter drones, their antennae modified to act as mobile signal relays. They hovered in the rain-heavy sky, indistinguishable from the gulls. She activated the honeypot using a dozen burner sims. She flooded the local cell towers with encrypted data, noise, all of it tagged with keywords related to Vale's ghost shipment. Anyone monitoring the pier would be drowning in false positives, forced to sift through terabytes of junk, all while Mara's real sensors watched them. Ronan, from his own command post in a nearby warehouse, deployed his dockhounds. They were his most trusted men, disguised as longshoremen, their tool bags carrying more than just wrenches. They moved into position, none of them aware that the shipment they were protecting did not exist. Only Kellen, who had positioned himself in an old watchtower with a pair of binoculars, and Mara, watching through her digital web, knew the truth. The bait was not a container. It was a 70-year-old woman in a beige raincoat. Then, a signal. Not from the pier, but from the dark web channel Blackbird had used to confirm the hit. It was a new message, directed at the account that had posted the original ledger, a string of ciphertext. Mara isolated it. It was not a standard encryption. It was a poem, the words replaced by numerical equivalents. It's 50s era, she murmured, running a linguistic analysis. American Plath Sextant. Her fingers flew. Got it. She found the key, a line from Lady Lazarus. Herr Doctor, Herr Enemy. She decrypted the message. The performance is at 3. The lady must not be late. He's arrogant, she said into the secure comm line to Ronan. He's telling us the time, and he's referencing Plath, a poem about resurrection. This suggests he's done this before, failed, and come back. Or he enjoys the theater. Ronan's voice came back, tight with controlled rage. Just keep my mother's eyes clear of the stage. At 2:50 p.m., Elodie Vale's modest sedan pulled up. She got out, ignoring Kellen's attempt to hold an umbrella over her. She smiled at the small group of homeless men and women huddled under a picnic shelter, her presence a small, warm light in the cold, driving rain. She began handing out thick wool blankets and thermoses of soup. Mara's drone-mounted thermal camera swept the surrounding buildings. A warehouse roof, 400 yards out. A glint of light that was not rain. A heat signature, sniper nest-shaped. Target, Mara said, her voice dropping. Warehouse, northwest, 400 yards. I see the scope. Kellen, Ronan ordered. I do not have the angle, Kellen's voice crackled. The overhang is blocking my shot. Elodie laughed, handing a man a blanket. The sniper was taking his time, lining up the perfect, untraceable shot. I can't stop him, Kellen growled. Ronan. Wait, Mara said. Her fingers danced, toggling the controls of her primary drone. I can't block him, but I can blind him. She maneuvered the drone, aligning it. Ronan, get ready to move your men. He's going to be angry. She found the angle. The drone was equipped with a high-intensity, narrow-beam laser, intended for data transmission. She hit the activation key. 400 yards away, the sniper, who had just exhaled, ready to pull the trigger, was suddenly blinded by a focused beam of intense, piercing light. His retinas screamed. He cried out, dropping his rifle, his vision exploding in a white, searing hot star. Now, Mara said. Move, Ronan commanded. The dockhounds broke cover, converging on the warehouse. Elodie Vale, shielded from the drama by the sound of the rain and her own conversation, merely looked up as the wind gusted, unaware that her life had just been saved by a beam of light from an artificial bird. Before Ronan's men were halfway to the warehouse, 2 black SUVs, sirens screaming, swerved onto the pier, cutting them off. Bist, they poured out, weapons raised. Stand down, Vale, a man in an expensive suit shouted, striding forward. He was young, ambitious, and had the hungry look of a man who enjoyed kicking down doors. "Agent Rowan Pike, I have a warrant to search this pier and that container." He pointed to the empty, camera-rigged decoy Ronan had left by the dock. Ronan emerged from the warehouse, his hands casually in his coat pockets. "Agent Pike, a pleasure. You seem to have me confused with a criminal." "We have credible intel you're moving unsecured biological agents," Pike said, enjoying the moment. "Biologicals? I thought it was stolen art this week," Ronan said, his voice laced with boredom. He nodded to the container. "By all means, search it, be my guest." As Pike and his team moved to the container, a BIST agent approached Ronan, holding a digital tablet. "We need your security confirmation to access the pier's manifest. Standard procedure." Pike was busy shouting orders at the container. Mara, forgotten in her van, watched the agent hand Ronan the tablet. She zoomed in. It was a standard BIST field device. A card reader was attached to its side. "Ronan," she whispered into her comm, "stall him. I need his tablet." Ronan, without missing a beat, turned to the agent. "I'm afraid I don't have my credentials. You'll have to ask my head of port security. He'll be here in, an hour." "That's unacceptable, Mr. Vale." "Pike," Ronan called out. "Your man is harassing me." While Pike was diverted, Mara acted. She remotely activated the Bluetooth on the agent's tablet. It was sloppy, unsecured. She pushed a single file, a backdoor. The agent's tablet pinged. A software update notification. The agent, annoyed, tapped install. Mara was in. She let them open the container. She watched on camera as they found Ronan's camera maze, a series of mirrors and pre-recorded video loops that made the empty box look like a labyrinth. While Pike was swearing, realizing he had been played, Mara was downloading. She pulled everything: Pike's files, case notes, and a secured directory. Inside it was a single project folder, Operation Seagull. It was a multi-agency plan to dismantle the Vale Syndicate, seize its assets, and nationalize the port, all under the NCCA's authority. The list of assets was precise. The timeline was aggressive. And then she saw the payment ledgers, monthly consulting fees paid by the NCCA. One name stood out, paid from a different account doctor, Hal Whitcomb, Private Pen E, Detroit. The blood drained from Mara's face. She stared at the name, the same name, the man who had signed her brother's death certificate, listing the cause as an overdose, the man who had cremated the body before she could even fly home. She was still staring, her hands shaking. When Ronan entered the van an hour later, the pier was quiet. Pike was gone. "He's gone," she said, her voice hollow. "The sniper, your men found the rifle, but he was gone." Kellen confirmed, but the operation was a success. Ronan said, "He stopped. He saw her face. What is it?" She turned the monitor to him. "Operation Seagull. They want to burn your entire world." She then pointed to the other file. "And that's the man who helped them bury my brother." Ronan looked at the name, then at the NCCA payment file, then back at Mara. The air in the van was thick and still. He finally understood. This was not two separate problems. It was one, single monster. "They are not just coming for my mother," he said, his voice low. "They are cleaning their house. Your brother was a loose end. My mother is another." He leaned against the console, the space in the van suddenly impossibly small. "I made a deal to protect my mother. That deal is now void." "What are you talking about?" "This is bigger than my family," he said. "This is about them." He looked at her, his eyes holding a new, dangerous resolve. "I'll make you a new deal. Mara, a debt exchange. I will help you hunt down every person on this list. I will help you find Whitcomb. I will burn Detroit to the ground for you, if that's what it takes." He paused, his gaze pinning her. "In exchange, you will not just be my eyes. You will be my right hand. You will help me find the traitor in my family, and you will help me dismantle the NCCA." They drove to a small, private chapel on the outskirts of the city, a place his mother visited when she was not handing out blankets. Elodie was there, arranging flowers. She looked up as they entered, her smile warm until she saw the look on her son's face. "Ronan, what is it?" "Mother," he said, and for the first time, Mara heard the ice in his voice crack. "We need to talk. You are not safe." As he explained, he gently took her hand. "You taught me to be careful. You taught me to be strong." He faltered, looking down at their joined hands. "I still remember the cut in the church kitchen. I was 9 years old. I dropped the soup pot." Elodie's eyes softened. "And you were bleeding. You were so brave. You did not even cry." "I was terrified," Ronan whispered, a confession that stunned Mara. "But you were calm. You held my hand under the water. You told me the pain would pass, but the scar would remind me to be more careful." He touched a faint, white line on his palm. "You bandaged me. You made me safe." He looked up, his eyes meeting his mother's. "I cannot bandage this, Mother, but I will make you safe." The dining room at Marrowgate was a mausoleum of old money, all dark mahogany, heavy silver, and the suffocating weight of ancestry. Mara felt like a virus in a clean pram, her modern-day armor of a simple black dress feeling thin and inadequate under the heavy, assessing gazes of the Vale inner circle. Priscilla Vale, Ronan's aunt, was the most unnerving. She smiled at Mara with a politician's practiced warmth, her diamonds catching the light of the chandelier. "Ronan, dear," she'd cooed, "you never told us you'd made a new acquaintance. She's lovely." "Mara is a consultant," Ronan had stated, his voice flat, offering no room for questions. Father Cassian, the port priest whose robes smelled of incense and the sea, bowed his head for grace. "Let us pray," his voice rumbled, "that in these times of trial, when shadows gather in our own halls, we find the strength to see the light and the wisdom to cast out the darkness." His eyes, old and sharp, flicked to Mara as he said it. Jace Varen, the weapons manager, handsome and reckless, raised his glass of whiskey. "To that," he grinned, "and a good risk management. May we all know which chair has the bomb under it." Elodie Vale, sitting at the opposite end of the table from her son, was the only point of calm. She ignored the undercurrents, smiling kindly at Mara. "I must thank your friend, Ronan," she said, her voice clear. "That new software she installed for the charity fund is wonderful. It's so efficient." Mara met her eyes, acknowledging the prearranged lie. "He just needs to trust in kindness," Elodie continued, her gaze shifting to Ronan, a gentle plea. "That's all that ever truly saves anyone." A high-pitched whine sliced through the tense quiet. It was not a sound that belonged in the 19th century garden. Mara was on her feet before the glass of the French door shattered. "Drone!" she yelled. "Get down!" A small, dark shape hovered over the patio, and then it popped. A canister hit the marble tiles and erupted in a cloud of thick, acrid gas. "Chaos!" Priscilla screamed. Jace overturned his chair, but Mara's focus was singular. She grabbed Elodie's arm, pulling her from the chair and onto the thick rug, shielding the older woman with her own body. "Cover your mouth. Don't breathe." Ronan was moving in the opposite direction. He did not run from the threat. He ran toward it. He vaulted the patio railing, a dark shape disappearing into the gas-shrouded hedges, chasing a fleeting shadow he'd seen leap the back wall. The gas, acrid and biting, billowed into the dining room. Mara's eyes streamed, her lungs burning. She dragged a gasping Elodie toward the kitchens, away from the contaminated air. 10 minutes later, the air had cleared. Ronan returned, his face a mask of black fury, his jacket torn at the sleeve. He was gone. Kellen Dorsey met them in the hallway, his face grim. He was holding a tiny, black disc in his palm. "Found it, boss," Kellen said, his voice low, taped behind the ancestral portrait in the main hall. Military-grade microphone, short-range transmitter, only someone who could get close. Someone who belonged here, could have planted it. The family was assembled in the study, a mess of frayed nerves and suspicion. Mara, her throat raw, was already working. She pulled a small, handheld spectrum analyzer from her bag. It might still be active. She coughed, her voice raspy. The receiver must be nearby. She powered it on. A spike of an unusual frequency lit up the screen. "It's live. Someone is listening right now." She followed the signal, moving through the opulent halls, her eyes on the climbing signal strength. Ronan was a shadow at her shoulder, his presence a cold, dangerous weight. The signal led them up the grand staircase, down the west wing, and stopped directly outside Priscilla's private study. Ronan did not knock. He kicked the door open. The receiver was small, sitting on the desk, its green light blinking, calmly recording the family's panic. "Ronan, what is the meaning of this?" Priscilla had followed them, her face a mask of indignation. Ronan ignored her. He walked to her antique safe, hidden behind a tapestry. "The combination, Priscilla, now. I will not be treated like this in my own home." Ronan drove his heel into the wall next to the safe, the plaster cracking. His voice was not a shout. It was a blade. "Now." Shaking. Priscilla opened the safe. Ronan shoved her aside, pulling out the contents, ledgers, jewelry, and a slim, leather-bound folio. He opened it. Mara watched his face as he read. The blood drained from it, leaving a pale, terrifying blankness. He handed the document to Mara. It was a contract, a mutual interest pact between Priscilla Vale and the National Covert Commerce Authority, in exchange for the NCCA turning a blind eye to Vale syndicate activities. Priscilla would provide intelligence to stabilize the port. A final clause detailed the removal of destabilizing elements, including unsanctioned philanthropic activities, like Elodie's. They returned to the study. Elodie was pale, wrapped in a blanket. Priscilla was already rebuilding her defense, dabbing at her eyes. "Oh, Ronan, it was dreadful." He dropped the open contract on the polished table in front of her. The sound was as loud as a gunshot in the heavy silence. "You traded her." Ronan's voice was barely a whisper. "You put her on a list to be executed for immunity." Priscilla's fake tears vanished. Her face hardened, the diamonds at her throat suddenly looking like chips of ice. She stood, straightening her dress. "I did what was necessary," she said, her voice clear and cold. "This family, this syndicate, is a living entity. It is more important than one person. It is more important than one mother." Elodie let out a small, strangled cry, a sound of such profound betrayal that Mara felt it in her own chest. "I did it," Priscilla spat, her gaze turning to Ronan. "To protect us from your sentimentality. The NCCA was going to burn us to the ground. I gave them an alternative. The family's survival is more important." Ronan stared at his aunt, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. Mara could almost see the violent impulse, the desire to snap her neck. And then he smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Mara had ever seen. "You're right, Aunt Mar," he said, the words smooth. "The family is what matters." He turned away. "Kellen, clean this mess up. And Priscilla, you look shaken. You should rest." Priscilla looked stunned. "Ronan?" "You are forgiven," he said, turning back, his face a mask of calm leadership. "You were trying to protect us. We will discuss your NCCA contacts. In fact, bring them to the Orpheum on Friday. It is time we diversified our partnerships." Priscilla, wrong-footed by his mercy, nodded slowly, suspicion warring with relief. Mara understood. He was not forgiving her. He was baiting a trap, using his own aunt as the lure. Later. Mara stood on the wide second-story balcony, the cold night air a relief on her still burning lungs. Her hands, she noted with detached irritation, were shaking, the adrenaline crash. She heard a single footstep behind her. "Ronan." He said nothing. He simply removed his heavy wool suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was warm from his body and smelled of iron, wool, and something clean and sharp. She shivered, but it was not from the cold. His hand brushed her shoulder as he settled the jacket. A fleeting, electric contact. They stood side by side, not touching, but she was enveloped in his scent, his warmth. She looked up, and he was already looking at her. His eyes were dark, and in the dim light from the house, the mask of the boss was gone. She saw the man, his gaze intense, focused. The air between them was suddenly thick, charged with the memory of the vault, the shared danger, the unspoken confession in his eyes. He took a shallow breath, as if to speak, but the moment broke. The mask slid back into place. He gave a single, curt nod and stepped back into the shadows of the house, leaving her alone with his jacket and the beating of her own heart. Friday night at the Orpheum was a symphony in blue smoke and bruised shadows. A live jazz quartet played in the corner, the saxophone's mournful notes curling around the patrons. Mara sat at the bar, nursing a club soda, her laptop hidden in the sound booth she had commandeered. She was wired directly into the main PA system, specifically the vintage microphone on the stage. Ronan stood in the darkness of a raised alcove, watching the VIP room. At 9:15, Priscilla arrived, looking triumphant. She was followed a moment later by her partner. The person was tall, moved with an arrogant swagger, and wore an elaborate Venetian-style butterfly mask that covered their entire face. A transport broker, Priscilla had claimed, a theatrical one. "He's in," Mara whispered into the comm. "I see him," Ronan's voice was gravel. In the VIP room, the masked figure sat down, their voice a digitally distorted baritone. Mara was already working. She isolated the microphone feed, filtering out the music, the clinking glasses, the entire room, until only the distorted voice remained. Then she began to strip the modulation. She ran her acoustic fingerprinting software, a custom-built program that analyzed the unique, physical imperfections of a person's voice, the larynx, the sinus cavities, a vocal fingerprint that distortion could not hide. She cross-referenced the sample with her BIS database. A match popped up, 99.97%. Her blood ran cold. The profile on her screen was not some shadowy assassin. It was the ambitious, clean-cut face of Agent Rowan Pike. Blackbird was a BIST agent, playing both sides. "It's Pike," she said, her voice flat. "The BIST agent from the pier. He is Blackbird." In the alcove, Ronan's hand tightened on the railing. He stepped out of the shadow. "Kellen," he said into his own comm, "seal the exits." "Ronan, no," Mara hissed, realizing what he was about to do. "Stop, he's not just a killer, he's federal. If you hit him, you bring the whole of BIS down on you. We need him." "We need him gone," Ronan countered. "No, we need him alive," she insisted, her voice urgent. "He's my only link to Whitcomb. He's the one who signed the checks to the medical examiner in Detroit. If he dies, the truth about my brother dies with him." Ronan paused. The silence on the line was heavy, a battle between his rage and his logic. "What's the play?" he finally bit out. "We need to know who he's talking to. I need to get a live tap on him. I have a device, but I have to get it on him." "Impossible, he's guarded." "Then we make a distraction." Mara looked across the club. Pike was watching them. His masked head tilted. He was arrogant. "He's watching you. He knows you're here. He thinks he's in control." Ronan came down from the alcove, his movements fluid. He walked straight to Mara's side. "What kind of distraction?" "Something they can't ignore." She pulled a tiny, coin-sized transmitter from her pocket. "They're watching us now. We have to look natural." Ronan glanced toward the VIP room. Pike was watching. He turned back to Mara. "Fine." He grabbed her hand, pulling her off the bar stool. "Hey," she protested. "We're having a disagreement," he said, his voice low as he pulled her toward the small dance floor. He was a good actor. His face was a mask of drunken frustration. "You're embarrassing me," he slurred, loud enough for the bouncer to hear. "You're drunk." She played along, trying to pull her hand free. He yanked her close. The music was slow, a bluesy, late-night lament. He put one hand on the small of her back, his other engulfing hers, and pulled her flush against him. Her breath caught in her throat. This was not like the stumble in the office. This was deliberate. His body was hard, his tailored suit doing nothing to hide the strength beneath. She could feel the heat of him, the solid wall of his chest. "Put the transmitter in my left hand," he murmured, his breath, warm and smelling of nothing but clean air, ghosting over her ear. His head was bent to hers, as if whispering lovers' secrets. "What are you—" "He's watching me, not you. Give it to me." Her fingers fumbled as she passed the small disc from her palm to his. They swayed to the music. Ronan was a surprisingly good dancer, his movements economical and precise. He held her firmly, leading, and for the first time in her life, Mara let someone else take control. His hand on her back was a brand, his fingers splayed, holding her possessively. He spun her slowly. The world narrowed to the scent of his skin and the low thrum of the bass. The music shifted, the tempo picking up. He did not release her. He just adjusted his grip, pulling her even closer, their bodies moving as one. It was intimate, controlled, and utterly devastating. She looked up, and his dark eyes were focused on her, unblinking, the rest of the club gone. Then, as quickly as it began, he stopped. He spun her out just before the line was crossed and let go. He was already walking away, heading for the VIP room. Mara, her heart hammering, watched him. He stumbled as he passed Pike's table, his hand bracing on the back of Pike's chair, right next to the agent's overcoat. The transfer was made. A moment later, chaos. Priscilla emerged from the VIP room, carrying a silver briefcase, her face pale. She hurried out the front door. Kellen materialized from the shadows, followed her at a discreet distance. Jace Varon, who had been drinking at a corner table, was suddenly, conspicuously, gone. Ronan returned to her side, his face grim. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He read it, and his expression turned to stone. He showed her the screen. "Trade the mother for the port." "Pike," Mara breathed. "He was testing you. He wanted to see if you and Priscilla were still aligned." "He has what he wants," Ronan said, his voice deadly. "He knows the family is broken." He looked at Mara, his decision absolute. "It's time. We're moving my mother to Ashdown now." They met in the industrial freight elevator of the parking garage an hour later. The mood was somber. The sterile, fluorescent light hummed. Ronan stared at the steel door. "When you said her name," he said, his voice so quiet she almost missed it. "That night on the pier, when you whispered in my ear." He held up his hand, the one that had snatched the ledger. "It trembled. My hand." He looked at her, his eyes raw with a vulnerability that shocked her. "For 20 years, I have never hesitated. I have never been anything but steady. But when you said her name, He shook his head, disgusted with himself. Mara felt her own defenses crack. This man, who was a monolith of control, was admitting a weakness she had already seen. "When I got the call about my brother," she said, her own voice quiet, "I flew to Detroit. I went to the hospital morgue. I remember the smell. It was chlorhexidine, that antiseptic chemical smell. It sticks in your throat." She looked at her own hands. The report said overdose, but Leo didn't use. "I told them. They didn't listen." She took a shaky breath. "Doctor. Whitcomb signed it. He told me it was a tragedy, but it was closed. He had my brother cremated before I could even get a second opinion. That report, that one lie, it broke my family. It's the reason I do what I do." Ronan watched her, his expression unreadable, but his gaze was fixed on her, absorbing every word. "Pike and Whitcomb," he said, the names a vow. "They did not just create a loose end, they created you. They changed the rules. They used the system to cover their tracks." He stepped closer, the elevator cage suddenly shrinking. "So, we will change the rules of the game." He was in her space now. She could feel the heat from his body, see the intensity in his eyes. He reached up, his gloved fingers brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. His touch was electric, impossibly gentle. "I will get him for you, Mara," he whispered. "I will get them all." She stared up at him, her heart thudding a heavy, slow rhythm. He was leaning in. She was not moving away. Their lips were a fraction of an inch apart. A metallic click echoed from above. They sprang apart. Ronan shoved her behind him, his hand already inside his coat, his eyes scanning the top of the elevator shaft. "What was that?" she whispered. "Nothing," he said, his voice hard again. "Rats." But on the steel catwalk 4 floors above them, Jace Varon lowered his phone. He looked at the photo he had just taken Ronan and the hacker. "Moments from a kiss." He smirked, added a caption, and uploaded it to a private dark web marketplace. Leverage. The Ashdown safe house was a lie, but it was a beautiful one. It was not a bunker, but an old stone lodge tucked into 100 acres of dense woods, smelling of pine, damp earth, and the warm, reassuring scent of the wood smoke pouring from the massive hearth. The kitchen was open, and in its center, Elodie Vale was not acting like a woman in hiding. She was heating water in an old copper kettle. She turned to Mara, holding out a steaming ceramic mug. "Mint tea," Elodie said, her smile gentle, her eyes kind. "It is from my own garden. It calms the nerves." Mara took the mug, her fingers wrapping around the unexpected warmth. This was not the guarded, fearful victim she had expected. This was a mother, offering a simple, profound gesture of trust. It unnerved Mara more than the drone attack. Ronan stood at the wide, dark window, a restless shadow scanning the tree line. "The perimeter is quiet," he said, but his voice was tight. "Kellen's men are sweeping the access road. They will not find anyone." "Ronan," Elodie said, sipping her own tea, "you should have some. You too. Mara, you are both wound so tight." Before Mara could reply, the world dissolved into noise and glass. The entire wall of windows exploded inward, shattered by a volley of suppressed gunfire. A high-caliber round thumped into the wall above Elodie's head, spraying plaster. "Cellar!" Ronan roared. He did not check for the source. He reacted. He grabbed his mother, shoving her toward the heavy oak door in the floor, while simultaneously shoving Mara toward her laptop bag. "Lock us in." "They're on comms," Mara shouted, her fingers already flying, ignoring the bullets chipping the stone fireplace. The attack was too coordinated. "Jace, he gave them our frequency." "Then blind them," Ronan ordered, unholstering his pistol and laying down precise, suppressing fire, the shots echoing like cannons in the room. He was not aiming to kill. He was aiming to force their heads down. Mara hit the activation key. Silent Net is live. A high-frequency pulse, undetectable to the human ear, flooded the property, instantly jamming every radio signal, cell phone, and GPS in a 2-mile radius. Outside, the coordinated attack dissolved into confused shouting. "Now move," Ronan yelled. He grabbed Elodie's hand, pulling her into the cellar opening. Mara snapped her laptop shut and slid down the steps after them, Ronan sealing the heavy, reinforced door just as boots hammered the floor above them. They were in the dark. The air was cool, smelling of damp earth and aging wine. The only sounds were their own ragged breaths and the heavy, muffled thuds from the floorboards above. Elodie was safe, huddled on the steps. The immediate danger had passed, but the air viber... "Jace," Mara whispered, the realization hitting her. "He sold us out." Ronan turned to her in the darkness. She could barely see his face, just the glint of his eyes, burning with a cold fury. "Kellen is on his way," he said, his voice a low growl. "But he will be too late. They know we are in here." "I know," Mara said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving a cold dread. Ronan stepped closer, his form blocking the dim light from the door's seams. "You saved her," he said, his voice raw, not with anger, but with a desperate, fractured gratitude. Twice they were shooting at her. He cupped her face, his hands rough and unsteady. "Thank you." And then his mouth was on hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision, a raw, desperate release of every ounce of fear, adrenaline, an unspoken tension that had simmered between them since the moment she's whispered in his ear on the pier. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, his lips demanding, as if trying to draw her strength into him. Her hands came up, gripping the front of his jacket, holding on as the world narrowed to this. She kissed him back with the same frantic energy, a shared acknowledgement that they were alive, and that it could end in the next 5 minutes. They broke apart, panting, foreheads pressed together in the dark. He was breathing as hard as she was. "I am not sorry," he breathed. The sounds from above stopped, a new sound, the whine of Kellen's SUVs arriving. The boots overhead scrambled, retreating. An hour later, the house was secure. Kellen's men were sweeping the woods. Elodie, pale but composed, had been moved to a downstairs bedroom. The lodge was a wreck of glass and bullet holes. Ronan found Mara in the attic, a small, unused room under the eaves, fragrant with the sharp, clean scent of cedar and pine. She was sitting by the rain-lashed window, just breathing. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only the bone-deep ache of the crash. The kiss in the cellar hung between them, a live wire. He did not speak. He walked to her, his movements slow, deliberate. He knelt in front of her. This time, his hands were gentle. He reached up, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her damp forehead. "Mara," he said, his voice low, the name a question. She did not pull away. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing, a silent, exhausted surrender. This was not the boss. This was not the hacker. This was just them. His hand slid from her hair to the side of her neck, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. Her skin was electric under his touch. Her own hands, she noted, were trembling. Not from fear this time, from a deep, unfamiliar longing. She raised them, resting them on his shoulders, feeling the solid, grounding strength of him. He kissed her again. This time, it was slow. It was a choice. It was not the desperate crash of the cellar, but a deep, searching tenderness. It was an exploration of every unspoken word, every shared glance, every moment of fear they had endured together. His lips were warm, questioning, and her mouth opened under his, a clear, definitive answer. He guided her back, and they fell onto an old daybed covered in canvas, the attic air thick with the smell of pine and the steady, rhythmic drumming of the rain on the roof. They moved together, a slow, tangled dance of equals. His hands, so strong, were incredibly gentle as they rediscovered her. Her fingers traced the lines of his face, as if memorizing him in the dark. It was a sanctuary in the middle of a war. It was the desperate, tender collision of two people who had been alone for too long. Their heartbeats, loud in the quiet room, found a shared rhythm. It was a promise made in silence, a moment of profound, undeniable consensus. Later, the silence in the room was warm, absolute. The rain hammered the roof, a steady, grounding drumbeat. Mara found herself smiling at the sound. Ronan, lying beside her, watched her, his expression unguarded for the first time. He reached over, pulling a thick wool blanket from a nearby trunk and wrapping it around her shoulders, pulling her against his side. His arm was heavy, secure, a brief, impossible peace. It was broken by the buzz of a burner phone on the floor. Ronan's body tensed, the piece shattering. He grabbed the phone. "Kellen!" His face hardened, the brief softness vanishing, the cold dawn returning. "He what?" A long pause. "I see. Thank you." He ended the call, the silence in the room suddenly brittle. "That was Kellen," he said, his voice flat and hard. "Jace. He didn't just give them the frequency. He sold our location. He gave the NCCA the Ashdown safe house in exchange for a clean maritime pass. He traded my mother for a shipping lane." They were downstairs in minutes. Elodie was waiting in the ruined kitchen, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She saw her son's face and knew. "Jace," she stated. It was not a question. Ronan nodded, his jaw tight. Elodie looked at her son. Then her gaze moved to Mara, who was standing just behind him. Elodie's eyes were sharp, missing nothing the shared exhaustion, the way Mara stood slightly in his shadow, the new unspoken alignment. She placed a hand on Ronan's cheek. "You cannot run forever, my son," she said softly. "And you cannot do this alone. You must trust the person you have chosen." Her eyes flicked meaningfully to Mara, a silent, powerful blessing that was also a command. Ronan looked at Mara, a new, dark understanding passing between them. They were no longer just allies. They were in this, bound by blood and betrayal. "She's right," Mara said, her voice firm, stepping to his side. "We don't run. We end this." Ronan nodded, a slow, dangerous smile touching his lips. "We stop playing defense. It is time to burn the house down." "We use the ledger," Mara said, her mind already racing. "Not as a bargain. We use it as a weapon." "We live stream it," Ronan finished, catching her thought. "We expose Pike, the NCCA, and Whitcomb. We will burn them all, in public." The fight had changed from defense to offense, and the first front was digital. While Ronan moved his mother to a new, truly deep-level safe house, Mara went hunting. She did not sleep. She dove into the Detroit mainframe, her digital fingers finding the cracks in Dr. Hal Whitcomb's private lab network. She found his firewall, bypassed it, and landed in his private accounts. It was all there, a hidden ledger, NCCA slush funds, payments, thousands of dollars at a time, for forensic consultations. And attached to each payment was a case number. She found the payment from 8 months ago, tagged with the case number for her brother, Leo. She opened the file. It was her brother's death certificate, the one that said overdose, and beside it, the original, unsigned draft, which listed the cause of death as blunt force trauma to the cranium homicide. She had him. She had the proof. The NCCA had not just covered up her brother's death, they had ordered it, and Whitcomb was the pen they used to write the lie. While she was dismantling Whitcomb's life, Ronan's was being challenged. Priscilla, believing Ronan's forgiveness was weakness, had made her move. She convened a secret consiglio at the Marrowgate dining room, a trial in all but name. Jace Varon and Father Cassian were there, the pillars of the old guard, their faces grim. "He has brought an outsider into our homes," Priscilla announced, her voice ringing with false righteousness. "He has jeopardized our operations, our immunity, our very lives for a piece of street trash, a hacker." "The girl is a problem," Jace Varon agreed, his arms crossed. "He's not thinking clearly. He's sentimental." "He has endangered his mother," Priscilla pressed. "He is unfit. I call for a vote to have him step aside, effective immediately, until this threat is neutralized." "That will not be necessary." Ronan's voice came from the doorway. He walked in, not as the accused, but as the judge. He was flanked by Kellen. "You speak of sentiment," Ronan said, his voice dangerously quiet. He walked to the head of the table. "You speak of threats." He tossed a file onto the polished wood. It was Priscilla's contract with the NCCA. "Here is the threat." Jace Varon's face went pale. Father Cassian looked, for the first time, truly afraid. "You," Ronan said, pointing a single, steady finger at Priscilla, "colluded with a federal agency to have my mother murdered. You." He turned to Jace. "Sold her location for a shipping lane. You sold me," he added, his voice dropping, "for a piece of silver." He held up the photo Jace had taken in the elevator. Before Priscilla or Jace could even form a denial, Ronan's burner phone rang. It was not a number. It was a private, encrypted call. He answered it, putting it on speaker. "Ronan," Elodie's voice strained and terrified. "Ronan, I am so sorry. The church." The line cut, replaced by the synthesized baritone of Blackbird. "The time for family squabbles is over, Vale." Pike's voice hissed. "The performance at the pier was a dress rehearsal. This is the main event." Kellen, who'd been on his own phone, looked up, his face ashen. "Boss, her security detail. They're all down. She was taken on the way to morning prayers. They left this." Kellen placed a small, wooden object on the table. It was the amulet Ronan had given Mara. Pike had left it on the steps of the church. This was not a negotiation. It was a declaration of war. Ronan's control snapped. He swept his arm across the table, sending the contract, the photo, and Priscilla's lies scattering. He was halfway to the door when Mara's voice, tinny and urgent, came from his phone. "Ronan, stop. Do not move. He wants you to run. He wants you to be predictable. I am tracking the car." Ronan froze, his hand on the door, his chest heaving. "Where?" "He's good," Mara said, her voice fast, businesslike. "He's using a clone plate, but he passed a traffic cam on Lombard. The algorithm is running. I am matching it against every feed in the city. Give me 10 minutes. The 10 minutes were the longest of Ronan's life. He stood in the hall while Priscilla, Jace, and Cassian remained frozen in the dining room. "Jace," Kellen said, his voice a low growl. He stepped up to the weapons manager, whose face was slick with sweat. "You thought you were dealing with the NCCA. You were dealing with Pike. He used you. He played you for a fool, and you got your boss's mother kidnapped." Jace looked like he was going to be sick. I didn't know. I swear, I thought it was just business." "It is time to pick a side. Figliolo," Kellen said, using the old world term. "You can die a traitor, or you can find redemption. Your choice." "What? What do you want me to do?" Jace whispered. "The armory. Pike's men are BIST. They're carrying government-issue rounds. I want you to open the private armory, and I want you to pull every live round from our weapons. We are not going in to win a war. We are going in to save a life." In the corner, Father Cassian clutched his rosary. "This is my fault," he murmured. "Years ago, before your father died, there was another attempt, a car bomb. I was the only one who knew. I did not tell your father. I moved Elodie to the old mission. I hid her." He looked up, his eyes filled with a desperate need for absolution. "I hid her then. I failed to protect her now. Ronan, let me be the exchange. He will listen to a priest." "He will shoot a priest," Ronan snapped. His phone buzzed. It was Mara. "The Alluvion," she said. "The old rail yard off the 95. It is a dead zone. No cell service. But it has a fiber optic trunk line running right under it. He's set up a command center." Ronan was moving. "We're on our way." "Ronan, wait," Mara shouted. "You cannot go in guns blazing. He has her. He wants to trade. You heard him. Trade the mother for the port. He wants the ledger, not your life." "He can have the port," Ronan roared, finally breaking. He was in his car, Mara on the speaker. "He can have the entire city. I do not care. I want my mother back." "And what happens then?" Mara's voice was sharp, cutting through his panic. "You give him the ledger, he kills her. He kills you, and he erases me and my brother's case. That is not a plan, that is suicide." "And what do you suggest?" he snarled. "We play his game," Mara said. "We trade the port, but it is a fake port. We give him a corrupted data file, a Trojan horse, and while he's busy opening his gift, we get your mother out." He was silent, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "He will not fall for it." "He will," Mara said, "because it will come with a sign of good faith. We will give him a decoy to chase. Get me Father Cassian's favorite statue." It was a bizarre request, but Ronan was desperate. An hour later, they were in the tunnels beneath the harbor. Mara was soldering a SIM card transmitter to a power pack. She stuffed it into the hollow base of an antique wooden statue of St. Peter. "A little sacrilegious, don't you think?" Kellen murmured. "St. Peter, the first dawn," Mara said, her face grim. "It's ironic. Jace, get this planted on the south side, where BIST patrols. They will find it. They will think it is the ledger, and it will pull Pike's federal support away, leaving him alone." As Jace sped off, a new video call came to Ronan's phone. It was Pike. The screen lit up. Pike was there. His butterfly mask gone, he looked pleased with himself, and beside him, tied to a chair, was Elodie. She was pale, but her eyes were defiant. "The clock is ticking, Ronan," Pike smiled. "You have 60 minutes to deliver the port the full ledger, with all access codes, or your mother gets to see God, courtesy of her son's sentimentality." A countdown timer appeared on the screen, 59:59. Elodie met Ronan's eyes on the small screen. She was not afraid. Ronan's hand, the one holding the phone, began to tremble. A slight, barely perceptible tremor. He was back on the pier. The boss, broken by a single name. Mara reached out. She did not touch his hand. She did not offer words of comfort. She simply placed her hand over his on the console, her fingers locking with his, her gaze firm, steady, and full of cold, shared purpose. His hand stopped shaking. He looked at her. She nodded once. He was not alone. The Alluvion was a cathedral of rust, a sprawling, abandoned rail yard where steel trains had come to die. Rain hammered the corrugated roofs, drumming a frantic rhythm that matched the tension of the assault. The attack was two-pronged. Kellen and Jace moved through the flooded storm drains, wading through a pitch-black, freezing current. Jace, his face set in a mask of grim atonement, wore a heavy ballistic vest under his gear. Kellen, a shadow with a silenced pistol, moved with the lethal economy of a man who had done this 100 times. Far below them, in the earth itself, Ronan and Mara navigated the fiber-optic utility tunnel. The air was dry but claustrophobic, a concrete tube barely 4 feet high. Mara led, her tablet displaying the feed from a flexible, articulated snake camera she guided into the junctions ahead. Ronan was right behind her, his bulk filling the tunnel, his hand never leaving the grip of his pistol. The snake cam's infrared feed showed the switching station hub. "We're directly below him," Mara whispered, her voice barely a breath. "He's set up in the main control room." They emerged through a floor grate into the station, a concrete bunker humming with the sound of high-end servers Pike had installed. "This is his command center," Mara said, moving immediately to the core network switch. She jacked in her laptop. "What are you doing?" Ronan asked, his eyes on the steel door. "The timer is running." "Insurance," Mara said, her fingers flying. She pulled a small, adhesive biometric sensor from her kit and slapped it onto her own wrist, covering it with her sleeve. "It's a dead man's ping, linked to my pulse." She hit a final key. A new timer appeared on her screen, 0130, 0129. "The system is now live," she explained, her voice all business. "It requires a heartbeat packet from this sensor every 90 seconds. If I'm incapacitated, if my pulse stops, or if I simply fail to hit the reset, the entire unredacted ledger, Blackbird, the NCCA, Whitcomb, my brother's real autopsy report uploads to 3 different international news syndicates, instantly." "You're betting our lives on a timer," Ronan said, his voice grim. "I'm controlling our lives," she corrected. "The clock is running. Let's go." They moved up the stairs to the main depot floor. It was a vast, cavernous space, lit by harsh industrial work lights, on a raised platform. Pike stood, flanked by 5 BIST agents in full tactical gear, and in front of him, tied to a steel chair, was Elodie. She was a small, pale figure in the center of the trap, Pike's perfect human shield. Ronan Vale Pike's voice, no longer disguised, boomed across the depot. "Right on time. How wonderfully, tragically predictable." He gestured to his BIS team. "You see, gentlemen, this is the man who is actively threatening the security of our nation's ports. A domestic terrorist, Operation Seagull is a matter of vital national security. He's using them," Mara hissed to Ronan. "They're just BIST agents. They think this is a real op. They have no idea he's Blackbird." Ronan stepped out of the shadows, his hands held open, away from his body. "Pike, enough games." "Games," Pike laughed. "This is the end game, Ronan." "Let her go," Ronan said, his voice resonant, not shouting, but projecting a calm authority that cut through the cavern. "This is between us. She's a civilian. She's not part of this. Take me. Let her walk. She's of no value to you." Pike stroked his chin, enjoying the moment. Elodie looked at her son. Her face was pale, but her eyes were fire. She was not afraid. She was furious. She met Ronan's gaze, and she gave a single, tiny, sharp nod, win. It was the command of a mother who knew her son, a sacrifice she was willing to make. "It's a tempting offer, Ronan," Pike sneered, "but I find leverage so comforting." "He has a sniper," Mara whispered, her eyes catching a glint in the high rafters. "He's not planning to let anyone walk out, but I have a toy, too." From her pack, she slipped a drone the size of a sparrow. It whirred, nearly silent, and shot up into the darkness above the lights. "What are you—" Ronan started. "He's not the only one who can see the field," she said. She guided the drone, her eyes on her tablet. It hovered just above the main heat sensor for the fire suppression system. She hit a single key. A high-intensity LED flashed, a pinpoint of light mimicking a flame. A loud clang echoed, and the depot's ancient sprinklers exploded to life, a deluge of cold, black, rusty water rained down, instantly plunging the scene into a chaotic, misty hell. "Kellen, now!" Ronan roared into his comm. The diversion was the trigger. The depot's main drainage grates burst open. Kellen moved like a wraith, a blur in the new, artificial fog. He used the chaos, the noise of the water, to close the distance. 3 precise, non-lethal shots from his silenced pistol, and 3 of the BIST agents were on the ground, clutching their knees or shoulders. Jace Varen, however, was pure, charging rage. He burst from another grate, ignoring Kellen's tactics, and ran straight for the main bay doors where the remaining agents were trying to regroup. "Jace, no!" Ronan yelled. An agent spun and fired a 3-round burst. The bullets hammered Jace's chest, the impact throwing him backward, but the heavy vest held. He roared, a sound of pure, adrenalized fury. He scrambled into the cab of a rusted gantry crane. His goal clear, with a groan of tortured metal, he swung the massive crane arm, lifting a 20-ton shipping container and dropping it squarely in the BIST agent's only exit path. "That's for Elodie," he yelled, slumping over the controls as the agents, now trapped, turned their fire on his cab. In the confusion, Pike saw the plan collapsing. He spotted Mara's laptop, left on a crate, its screen flashing an ominous red, the timer, 0015, 0014. He saw the upload protocol. He finally understood. "You bitch!" he screamed. He lunged, ignoring Ronan, and grabbed Mara. He yanked her back, slamming her hard against a steel railing, and pressed the hot muzzle of his pistol to her temple. "Stop it, stop the upload, or I kill you." Ronan froze, his own weapon up, but the shot was impossible. "Let her go, Pike." 0009, 0008. "Stop it!" Pike shrieked, pressing the gun harder. "I can't!" Mara gasped, her voice a perfect imitation of panic. "It's automated. It's not a script. It's in the system, crone." "What, Pike?" A man who believed himself a tech expert was momentarily wrong-footed. "Check/etc/cron," she whimpered, feeding him the technical bait. It was all she needed. His eyes, for just 1/10 of a second, flickered to the laptop screen, trying to process the jargon. Mara moved. She dropped her weight, twisting his arm, and slammed his gun hand down onto the steel railing. A sickening crack of bone echoed. The pistol clattered away. Pike screamed, a sound of pure agony. Ronan was on him in an instant, a single, brutal elbow strike to the solar plexus that dropped the agent to his knees. 0003, 0002. "Mara the timer," Ronan yelled, kicking Pike's gun away. Mara scrambled for the laptop. Her wrist, where Pike had grabbed her, was on fire. Her hand was shaking so violently she could not focus. The cursor blinked. The screen was red. 0001. She lunged, smashing her entire shaking, injured palm down onto the enter key. The screen flashed. Ping reset. Timer 0130. She sagged against the server rack, gasping for breath. The ledger was theirs. Pike was captured. Kellen was already untying Elodie. The depot was filled with the sound of the sprinklers and their own ragged breathing. They had won. The depot was a cacophony of dripping water and pain. The sprinklers, their work done, sputtered to a halt, leaving the air thick with the smell of rust and cordite. Ronan stood over Rowan Pike, his pistol aimed squarely between the man's eyes, his hand steady. Pike, kneeling in the filth, his wrist shattered, looked up and began to laugh. It was a wet, gurgling sound of pure, bitter arrogance. "You think this is it?" Pike spat, blood on his lips. "You think you've won, you organization? You have no idea what you have just stepped into." "You're the one on your knees," Ronan growled. "I am an asset," Pike yelled, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "The NCCA has contingencies. You did not just fight a rogue agent. Vale, you fought the system, and the system always wins." "Who?" Mara demanded, her voice tight. She was nursing her own injured wrist, her eyes locked on the defeated agent. "Director Miera Quinn," Pike said, savoring the name. She signed the order. "Operation Seagull is not a project. It is national policy. She's stabilizing the country's logistics. You and your mother," he sneered, "are just unstable elements, and Quinn, she hates unstable elements." Ronan's finger tightened on the trigger. "Oh, and for you, hacker." Pike grinned, a terrible, bloody expression. "Your ghost. Your whole reason for being here? Dr. Whitcomb." Mara's breath hitched. She took a step forward. "He's on a federal transport plane." Pike laughed. "Wheels up from Detroit about 20 minutes ago. He's being transferred to a black site. Your leverage, your justice, your brother's memory. It is gone. You will never see him again." The words hit Mara like a physical blow. The proof, the confession, the one man who could clear Leo's name gone. Ronan saw the look on her face, the flicker of despair. His own face hardened, and the last shred of his control snapped. He cocked the hammer of his pistol. "Ronan, no." Elodie's voice was a command. She stepped forward, pushing past Kellen, who had just finished securing the last of the BIST agents. She was soaked, shivering, and draped in a heavy blanket, but her spine was iron. She put her hand on her son's arm, gently but firmly pushing the gun away from Pike's head. "Not like this," she said, her voice quiet but absolute. "Not in front of me. He tried to kill you. Mother," Ronan's voice was a strained whisper. "And he failed," Elodie said, her eyes never leaving Pike's. "I want my name back. I want my life back. But I want it with the truth. If you kill him, you make him a martyr and you make his lies true. We win with the light, not with more blood." Ronan was trembling, caught between his mother's morality and his own code. He slowly, painfully lowered the pistol. Mara stared at her laptop. The red timer was still there. 01:29:45, 01:29:44. The dead man's ping. She could just walk away. Let the timer run out. She could burn them all. Quinn, Pike, the NCCA. She could have her revenge for Leo. But her eyes scanned the file manifest. The ledger was not just names. It was logistics, shipping schedules, payrolls for hundreds of longshoremen, union drivers, and port clerks who had no idea who Ronan Vale really was. They were just families, earning a living. If she let this upload, the federal government would freeze the entire port. They would seize everything. Hundreds of innocent people would lose their jobs, their pensions, their lives, all caught in her fire. She was torn. Justice for her brother, Anonta, or mercy for them. Ronan watched her. He saw the agonizing choice warring in her eyes. He walked over to her, his heavy boots silent in the dripping water. He stood beside her, his presence a solid, grounding force. He looked at her shaking hand, the one hovering over the keyboard. He placed his hand over hers, not to stop her, not to force her, just to be there. "We do it the right way," he said, his voice low, for her alone, the hard way. It was not an order. It was a consensus, forged in the fire and the rain, a mature promise. Mara let out a breath she had been holding for 8 months. She nodded, a single sharp dip of her chin. The hard way. "Get him on his feet," Ronan ordered Kellen. "Mara," he said, his focus absolute. "Call Director Quinn." "She won't answer." "She will, from his phone." Mara grabbed Pike's phone, forcing the agent's thumb onto the sensor. He cried out, but the phone unlocked. She found the number. Mara Quinn, direct. She hit call and speaker. It rang once. "Agent Pike." Quinn's clipped, powerful voice filled the depot. "Your timing is sloppy. Is it done?" "Not exactly," Mara said. A frigid silence. "Who is this?" "This is the unstable element, and I have your agent, I have your ledger, and I have your Operation Seagull recorded. You are on speakerphone with the Vale Syndicate." "You are making a grave mistake." "No, you did," Mara cut in, her voice like steel. "When you sent Pike to the Orpheum to meet Priscilla Vale, he was very talkative about national stability, about you." She hit a key. A crystal-clear audio file played. Pike's voice. "Quinn wants the port clean. She doesn't care how—" Quinn said nothing, but Mara could hear the sharp intake of breath. She was trapped. "Here is the new deal," Mara said, pacing. "You get your ledger, all copies, all authentication codes. You even get Agent Pike, though his wrist is broken." "What do you want?" Quinn's voice was ice. "One full, public, ironclad federal immunity and protection for Elodie Vale. 2, Mara continued, blanket immunity for every union worker and port employee listed in that ledger. They are non-combatants. You do not touch them. 3, Mara's voice dropped, the personal, ragged edge returning. The plane, the one you put Dr. Hal Whitcomb on. It turns around and you deliver him and Pike to us, not to the police. To us. That is impossible." "It is non-negotiable," Ronan's voice cut in, as final as a death sentence. "Or we let the 90-second timer run out. Your call." Quinn weighed the public, career-ending scandal against a quiet, technical transfer. The choice was obvious. "No, Civic Freight Terminal," Quinn seethed. "The old one. Before dawn, 5 a.m. Send the transfer codes, and the exchange will be made." The line clicked dead. The depot was quiet. Kellen was moving Jace, who was alive, his vest having saved him, toward the exit. Elodie was sitting on a crate, watching her son. Ronan and Mara were alone for a moment in the adjoining concrete hallway, the water dripping around them. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. He turned to her. "You saved her." "We saved her?" she whispered. "You had the choice," he said, his voice rough, "to burn it all for your brother. You did not." "It was not the right way," she replied, echoing his words. He stepped into her space. His hand, scraped and bruised, came up to her face, his thumb gently brushing a smudge of grime from her cheek. "This is not over." "I know." He kissed her. It was not the frantic, desperate kiss of the seller. It was a promise, short, deep, and absolute. It was a seal on their new reality. It was a kiss that spoke of respect, of gratitude, and of a dark, shared future. It was a kiss that said, "I see you, I am with you, and we will face what comes next." He rested his forehead against hers. 5 a.m., he whispered. They walked back to Elodie. She stood, her gaze moving between them, seeing the shift. She pulled Ronan into a fierce, tight hug. "My son, you came for me." "Always," he said, his voice thick. She pulled back, but kept her hands on his arms. Then she looked past him, at Mara, who was standing back respectfully. Elodie let go of Ronan and walked to Mara. She did not hug her. She took Mara's good hand in both of her own. "He is a good man," Elodie said, her voice quiet and firm. "But this world, it makes him hard. It forces him to be—" Elodie looked Mara square in the eyes, a silent passing of the torch. "Keep his heart soft, child. You are the only one who can—" It was not a request. It was a mother's blessing, and a charge. The sky over the Civic Freight Terminal was a deep, bruised purple, the color of a fresh wound just before dawn. 5 a.m. Myra Quinn arrived, not with Bist, but with a different, harder-looking team. Fockbost, their vests red, Federal Operations Command for Borders and Systems Trade. She looked confident, flanked by 8 agents, ready to sanitize the scene, which clearly meant arresting both Ronan and Pike once the data was in her possession. "The codes," Quinn demanded, her voice clipped, her breath pluming in the cold. Mara stepped forward, laptop in hand. "The transfer is ready, but Director, you should know, I am a gray hat. I do not trust anyone." She began the transfer. I added a little something, a forensic watermark. Quinn's eyes narrowed. "Every file you are receiving," Mara said, her voice amplified by the cavernous terminal, "is currently being live-streamed, encrypted, to the servers of 3 international investigative journalism bureaus. If those streams are interrupted, if my heartbeat ping stops, if your agents move, if a single shot is fired, the decryption key releases. Your Operation Seagull will be on the front page by sunrise." Quinn's face went white with fury. She was in a cage Mara had built. "You—" "It is not a negotiation, Director," Ronan said, stepping out of the shadows. "It is a technical agreement, now. Our part of the bargain." A black van reversed. 2 Fokbast agents dragged a man out, his hands cuffed. "Dr. Hal Whitcomb." He looked terrified. They pushed him toward Mara. "Say it," Mara commanded, her voice shaking. "Say what you did." I... Whitcomb stammered, looking at Ronan, then at Mara. "Tell me about my brother," she insisted. "The file... it was trauma," Whitcomb whispered, the confession tearing from him. "He was murdered. They paid me... the NCCA. They paid me to change it, to sign the overdose. I am sorry." It was not justice. It was not enough. But it was the truth. It was the start. "You're done, Quinn," Ronan said. But Pike, who had been silent, his arm in a crude sling, had one last move. With his good hand, he lunged for an agent's sidearm. He was fast, fueled by desperation, pulling the gun free and leveling it at Ronan. "No!" Elodie screamed. A shot, but it was not Ronan who fell. Kellen, moving with impossible speed for an older man, had stepped between them. The bullet tore through his shoulder. A graze, but the force spun him. Ronan did not fire back. In that split second, he made the choice Elodie had asked for. He did not execute Pike. He brought the butt of his pistol down on Pike's head, a hard, definitive thud. The agent collapsed. Ronan turned to Kellen, who was already waving him off. "It is a scratch, boss, just a scratch." Ronan looked at the unconscious Pike. He had chosen the hard way. The law, however flawed, could have him. As the Fokbast agents, now neutralized by Quinn's forced compliance, were disarming Pike, a different kind of drama unfolded by the gate. A sedan screeched to a halt, Priscilla Vale attempting to flee. But she was blocked by Jace Varon, his arm in a sling, his face bruised. He was not alone. He had brought the press the local, independent journalists Mara had tipped off. "That's her," Jace shouted, pointing. "Priscilla Vale. She's the one who sold out the harbor to Bist." He held up a digital recorder. "And I have the tapes of her meeting." Jace looked at Ronan, a look of desperate, final redemption. The tumor was cut. Quinn, her operation in Smoking Ruins, gave the order. "Withdraw, all units, withdraw. This scene is compromised." The federal agents vanished, taking the unconscious Pike and the weeping Whitcomb with them. The press, smelling blood, converged. But Elodie Vale stepped forward, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the chaos. "There's been a terrible sickness in our harbor," she said to the cameras, "an attempt by outside forces to exploit our workers." She announced the immediate establishment of a legal defense fund, sponsored by her foundation, for every port worker affected by the NCCA's illegal operation. She moved to Ronan, ignoring the cameras, and kissed him on the forehead. A public act of forgiveness and a transfer of power. The Vale Syndicate was dead. The Vale Protection Service was born. The Bist and Fokbast agencies would spend the next 6 months investigating themselves, issuing vague press releases. But it did not matter. The ledger was out of their control. The shadow machine had been brought into the light. The next night, the rain returned, but it was different. A soft, cleansing percussion on the windows of Astor House. Mara's shop was dark, the only illumination a warm, yellow bulb above her server rack. They were sitting on the floor, their backs against the humming servers, sharing a cheap bottle of wine. Their hands were intertwined, Mara's fingers tracing the healed scar on his palm. "A legitimate protection network," she said, her voice soft in the quiet. "Guarding the unions against corporate raiders and people like Quinn." "It is a start," and he said, "a new boundary." He turned to her, the darkness hiding the intensity in his eyes. You kept my heart soft, Mara." He used his mother's words. "You kept mine beating," she whispered. The space between them closed. He kissed her. And it was not the kiss of the cellar or the promise of the hallway. This was a kiss of arrival. It was slow and deep and tasted of wine and relief. There were no masks, no roles, just Ronan and Mara. His hand came up to her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized had fallen. She smiled against his lips, her own hands, one still bruised from the fight, wrapped around his neck, holding him tightly, as if he were an anchor. It was a silent, profound commitment, a consensus of two souls who had chosen the hard path together. Hours later, he was asleep, his head in her lap. The rain had almost stopped. She idly opened her laptop, looking at the copy of the ledger, her trophy. She ran a final diagnostic, just to be sure. And then, something new. Now that the main protocols were shut down, a hidden line of code, dormant, appeared at the bottom of the root file. It was not Pike's clumsy signature. It was the original algorithm. Blackbird = rotative mantle. Her blood chilled. Rotative mantle. It was an obscure term from deep Earth geology. It was a reference her brother, Leo, had used in his PhD thesis. Pike had not written the code. Pike had not been the first Blackbird. Someone else had, someone who knew her brother. She looked at Ronan, sleeping peacefully, the first true peace she had ever seen on his face. A new, deeper shadow was still out there, sleeping. But that was a battle for another day. Tonight, they had saved a mother. They had found each other, and they had chosen the hard path. For now, that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Story, and like this video. For more support, hit that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.